Shalom, I'm Naama Rue. This is my husband, Rabbi David Rue. And we're going to continue discussing things we need to know about observing the Shmita year beginning this Rosh Hashanah. And I've been talking a lot about my garden, things I grow. We've been talking about things in the kitchen. But what do we need to know when we're buying our food?
Before we really begin discussing that, there are a series of concepts that we have to have control of. One is shamor. One of the things that it says is that God has declared all the land ownerless. So shamor is, even though my land, what was my land last year, is not my land anymore, and it's free for anyone to come and take the produce of it, what happens if I lock it up? If I lock it up so people can't get in, that's called shamor. There is another concept called ne'avad. I'm ordered not to work the land. What if I do work it? What happens then? There are issues of what's called Mesirat Demei Shvis La'amaretz, that you're not allowed to give money that has sanctity of the Shmita year to an Amaretz. An Amaretz here isn't an ignorant person. It's someone, it could be someone that doesn't know the laws of Shmita, doesn't understand that this money is different than other monies. It could also be someone that's not careful about it. But here it only refers to vis-a-vis their observance of the Shmita. There is a general prohibition that we're told that we're given the food to eat and not to sell. So, schora, perishvis. There's also, because they're holy, we're not allowed to measure them. If, for instance, I have a bechor, a firstborn animal, that became blemished, so I'm allowed to eat it, and it's a cow. It grew up before it became blemished. I now have 4,000 pounds of meat. I can't eat the whole 4,000 pounds of meat before it goes bad. So I'm going to sell some of it. And I can do that, but when I sell it, I can't measure it. I can't weigh it. Same, because it's holy. It has to be treated differently than other purchases and sales. So too, with the fruit of the Shmita year, I can't measure it, weigh it, and sell it. So how do I deal with these things in terms of Shmita? And the last one, which is what I want to talk about more today, is called svichin. Svichin are things that grow on their own. And we'll see there are some psukim in the Torah that talk a little bit about this. And there's a lot of rabbinic legislation. So in Vayikra Perek Kaf Hey, starting pasuk Chaf, V'kiso if you will say, "Mano chal b'shna hashvis," what are we going to eat during the Shmita year? Hen lo nizra, we do not seed, we do not plant. V'lo ne'asafas t'vuseinu, and we do not gather our produce. And God responds, "V'tzvisias birchasi lechem b'shna hashishis," I will command my bracha to you on the 6th year. Ve'asas es hatavua l'shlosh shanim, and the land will make the produce for 3 years. Uzratim et shnat hashminis, and you will seed in the 8th year. Ve'achalta min hatvua yashan, and you will eat from the old produce ad hashanat she'is, until the 9th year. Ad bo tvuasa v'tochlu yashan, until the new produce comes, you will eat from the old. Varetz lo simachtim kor litzmisus, and the land will not be sold for eternity. Ki li haaretz, because mine is the land. Ki gerim v'soshavim atem imadi, because you are sojourners with me. Now, the Yalkut Shimoni brings a machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim. The Kitomru, and if you will say, Atidim atem lomar, in the future you will say, Mano hal b'shna hashminis, what are we going to eat in the 8th year? We didn't plan because normally the harvest is really at the end of the year. Right, Sukkot is Chag Asif, the festival of the harvest, meaning we're finishing the harvest now. That's why we're having this festival. And we've now got everything we need for the next year. But what do you do the year after that? right? We harvest in the 6th year for the 7th year, but normally we would harvest in the 7th year for the 8th year, but there's no harvest. Hen lo nizrav and lo nasofas tfusenu, because we're not harvesting and we're not gathering our produce. Amar Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, Im ein zorim mahem osim. If they're not seeding at all, they wouldn't be able to gather anything. Mikan l'svichim shem nesurim. So here, things that grow on their own are prohibited. Meaning, normally if you harvest a wheat field, enough wheat is going to drop in the ground that there will be wheat growing there the following year. On its own. I didn't plant it. Didn't want it to be there. I might have wanted the field for something else, but there will be some wheat growing there. So Rabbi Akiva says, if you didn't plant, why does he have to say that you can't harvest? He's saying even the things that grow on themselves, you're not allowed to harvest. There's no prohibition on svichim, on the things that grow on themselves from Torah law. It's a rabbinic prohibition. So why does it say we didn't plant, we won't gather our produce? Amart lanu al tizra'u mash anu konsin ein machnisin lakim. You're not allowed to seed, you're not allowed to plant. And what you gather, you can't do it for long term. Because amart lanu iruhu. We're told to dispose of it, meaning as soon as there's no longer for the wild animals in the field, we're supposed to dispose of it from our house. And we'll talk more about this later. So once we get rid of the stuff, what are we going to use from now on? So the Rambam and the vast majority of the Rishonim paskin like the Chamim and not like Rabbi Akiva. The Smag and the Yereim paskin like Rabbi Akiva. So for most authorities, there is no prohibition of gathering what grows on its own according to Torah law. It's only rabbinic law. Now,
that's what I'm going to be putting my investment.
Having said that, what happens if you planted something anyway? I don't care. I planted it anyway. Or I forgot that it was Shmita. Or my bag broke. So the Rambam says, Avar v'zara b'shvis yatz l'shminis. If I transgressed and I planted on the seventh year, and it came out in the 8th year, Asar b'motzi shvis kishar hasvichim. You're not allowed to gather it even in the 8th year. What you planted in the 7th year, even if it's now the 8th year, doesn't matter. You can't grow it, at least until it grows on its own.
What happens to the tree nurseries? They go out of business that year?
Well, there are different things they can do, but they're not planting normally. I mean, they can plant everything before the Shemitah year. You can plant. There are other ways of dealing it that I can't get into now, but we'll get into in their time.
Don't put it in the ground.
Well, there's much more to it than that. But
yeah.
The Chazon Ish says that svichim only apply to things that haven't begun to grow. Rav Karelitz, a relative of the Chazon Ish, testified that there was a field that they planted in time, but it hardly sprouted at all. And the Chazon Ish, there's a picture of Rav Karelitz and the Chazon Ish visiting this field, and he found 3 places in the entire field where some leaves were above the ground, and he said that allows everything in this field to be gathered for the Shemitah. And of course, the Chazon Ish was using Otzer Basin, which we've discussed a little bit in the past, and we'll discuss more in the future. So, vegetables that have been planted in the 6th year and have at least begun to show a little bit of their leaves above the ground, they do not have nifser of svichim. They can be harvested and used. How they're harvested and used is a different issue. We'll get to that more. But if they start their growth in the 7th year, then we have a problem using them in the 7th year, even in the 8th year, until the amount of time it would have taken for a plant to grow and produce. So if it took, let's say it takes 2 weeks for a plant that I plant now to be ready to give its first fruit. I'm just making up a number. I know it's not realistic. So 2 weeks after Rosh Hashanah, all of that species of fruit or vegetable would be permitted. Remember, svichim can only really apply to vegetables. It can't apply to fruit. Anything that grows from a tree, the tree takes longer than a year to grow until you can get any fruit from it anyway. In fact, the halacha of Orla basically only applies to transplanted trees and grafted trees, because no fruit tree, if you plant the seed in the ground, grows to the point where it gives a fruit within 3 years. So in any case, this halacha of Svichim is only talking about vegetables and not about fruits. This will be important as we discuss more things later on.
Thank you.